Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Bell, and I am the Gene Jones Director of Public Programs here at the Nevada Museum of Art. Thank you for coming to today's Art Bite, exploring Anita Baldwin, her Fallen Leaf Lake estate, and Maynard Dixon. If you would please take a moment to silence your cell phones, we would really appreciate it. At the end of today's talk, we will be passing around microphones for Q&A. If you could please speak loudly and clearly into the microphone, it helps us be able to capture it for our recording as well as for Marilyn. I can't believe that Sagebrush and Solitude, Maynard Dixon in Nevada, is coming to a close. This exhibition runs through next Saturday, July 27th, and I think we can all agree it has been a really great run. Super fun exhibition. Thank you to our many sponsors who made this exhibition and its programming possible. Thank you to our volunteers and visitors who have shown up in a really big way for this exhibition. We're excited to have you here today for what I think will be a really unique Art Bite. Marilyn Long is a longtime volunteer at the Lake Tahoe Historical Society and Tallac Historic Site. When Ann Wolfe and I sat down for lunch with Marilyn for the first time, I was really stunned. She knows more about Anita Baldwin and Fallen Leaf Lake than anyone I've ever met. It has been so fun to hear her stories and be transported to a different time. You know, Marilyn knows so much about Anita Baldwin, she might even be Anita Baldwin. I guess you'll just have to see for yourself. I'll hand it over to Anita Baldwin. Here she is.
There's so many people here. I'm not sure I'm ready to do this. But there's my friend Susan and my friend John, and Roberta's here too. I guess I'll stay. Well, I am Anita M. Baldwin. My father was Elias Jackson Baldwin. Some people said he was lucky. I don't think he was lucky. He knew exactly what he was doing. He came out from the Midwest to California in 1853. He didn't come out to mine or to explore like other people. He knew exactly what he was doing. He loaded up a wagon full of goods. He brought with him his first wife, Clara Underwood, and, it was Sarah was his wife. My sister is Clara. She came with them also. You know, Clara and I are the only daughters of Anita Baldwin, and we are 26 years apart in age. So when Father came out, he went straight, after selling goods along the way, to San Francisco. In San Francisco, he bought a corner piece of property right at Powell and Market Street. He built a big hotel. It had a fine theater in it, and that's where I was born. But in the meantime, Father was always looking for more investments and things. He was the first president of the Pacific Coast Stock Exchange. He also was interested in Southern California. When he decided that he wanted to buy land down there, he bought the land for over Santa Anita Rancho. Now he did that in 1875. I was born in 1876. Father was so happy to have a centennial baby. But now you know who was named after what. That Santa Anita Rancho was his home for his entire life. In addition, he started looking around for other properties. He bought 50,000 acres down in Southern California. He said someday it would have oil. And he also decided that he wanted a place to kind of get away from it. And since he had interest in the Comstocks, he decided to come up to that beautiful place in Tahoe. Well, you may know there was a lot of clear cutting of wood, and Father looked at the land and was ecstatic to see that there was this piece of land that he could buy. He could buy right on the lake edge and half of the area around that beautiful lake called Fallen Leaf Lake. And it was one of the only areas in the Tahoe Basin that hadn't been clear cut. So it had the old growth, huge trees all over the property. But Father was always into doing things, so he took the property closest to the lake, that's Tahoe, and he built a resort. It was called the Tallac Resort. It had all the amenities. The steamers came in and out who brought guests with them. But I became a little bit more interested in the area around Fallen Leaf Lake. Things went along well for years. I must mention that I was married twice. I married a cousin when I was 16 years old. Father was appalled. We went out on the bay and got married, but came back, and Father was so upset. But he decided that this shouldn't happen. The only problem was I did have twin boys, and they both died in infancy. Later, I met McConaughey. He was a man from San Francisco. He loves San Francisco. Didn't care much for Southern California. So when I wanted to spend time in the San Francisco or up at Fallen Leaf Lake, we decided that we weren't maybe as compatible as we thought we would be. But we did have 2 children. The first child I had was Dextra. Dextra was just a joy. She is such a bouncing person and really into things. She actually resembles my sister Clara much more than she resembles me. I'll explain some of that later. And then we had a son, named him Baldwin. When McGonigal and I decided to split, I was supposed to keep the children's names as they were, but I wanted mine to go back to Baldwin. So that's why I'm still known as Anita Baldwin. Dextra, she was kind of already into young men, and she married a young man named Winters, so she didn't have to deal with that. But Baldwin, I don't know if you know, he's a musician in San Francisco. And what do you think a musician's name sounds like when you call him Baldwin Baldwin? Well, like I say, there was Fallen Leaf Lake, and I kind of looked at the property and I noticed there was a little bit of an indentation in the area around the area that I wanted to build my home on. Well, I built my home, Nijiwar. It was a beautiful place, the whole one side of Fallen Leaf Lake that we owned. I wanted to build a house there. I wanted to build guest accommodations so that I could invite people to come. And you may question that name, Nijiwar. Well, I tend to give things their own individual name. That particular name is House by the Water. And that's what I was going to build, is a house by the water. I don't call a house there a house. I call it a piva. That's another one of those things. Actually, I've spent a lot of times with Native Americans, and I try to adopt some of the language that I hear from them. My house is the clearest one next to the lake. And then the other place that's on my map here is where the stables are. And then way at the top, you'll notice there's a place for a house, but there's this beautiful bay. It's called Sawmill Bay, Cove, in fact. And it has a beautiful beach, one of the best places to go swimming. And with all of that, we built the whole compound. Well, we had two places that I called wigwams. That's actually my guest homes. And that's where Maynard and Dorothea will be staying with their children. There's also my own home, the Piva. We have still the sawmill is still standing, although the mill portion has been removed, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then besides that, we have a spring above, and so we have fresh water at all times. And it's just a lovely place. Nijiwar is definitely my favorite place to go. Here's that boathouse and the sawmill that used to be there. This is on Sawmill Cove. That we took the boathouse, that big building on the left, and we built a second floor in it. That's so when we come up in our cars, we can have our cars on the second floor and still have the boat house ready for the boat and other belongings on the bottom. You'll notice to the right, there's another building that we've added. That's a bathhouse. Of course, if you're going to be at the beach, you need a place to go and get ready and so forth. And so we also have there a sauna. And with Maynard coming with his family, and I understand they may bring some extra children, I have a large tent that I can also set up and let them be there. My home, on the other hand, is very small. Has a front door that faces the lake, has a kitchen area, has an area for some of the house servants to stay with us, and has a great room, and besides my bedroom and area. That porch is built of beautiful logs. You can sit there and look out at that fallen leaf lake. It's a peaceful place. In the afternoon, you can just enjoy yourself while you're sitting there. This is a picture of my house. This is the bedroom side of my house. You'll notice it has big logs. Well, Father wanted to save all those logs originally on the property, and he did, because he decided which trees would be cut for the wood for the resort. And I also maintain the big trees because they are unbelievable, cedars and Jeffrey pines. But we had to build some more things on the exterior. Some people don't like to sit in the shade, so we put a little bit of a thing out there for the people that don't want to sit on the porch with us. Father died in 1909, and the resort was kind of going to a little bit of problems. In the meantime, Dexter and I decided to build our home in the 20s, and when Father died in 1909, and you may have heard, but it took us 15 years through the courts to get our inheritance for Clara and I. There were so many other people that thought they should have some of the other money. And then finally it was settled for us. So I could build exactly what I wanted to at Fallen Leaf Lake. One of the big things I wanted to have is a place that I could come up in the spring or in the fall and in the summer to Fallen Leaf Lake. And if you know anything about Tahoe weather, you know it can be very cold right in the middle of the summer, or it can be very warm. But to come at those times of year, I wanted a large house. And the architect that helped Dexter and I build our home suggested we put in a double fireplace, with one side of the fireplace open to the great room, and the second side of the fireplace would open to our bedroom. And if you go down to look at Dexter's house, you'll see hers is set up exactly the same way. And who would put current furniture in this house? I employed some people to build us native furniture out of the wood, so it would look rustic in the house. And that's why I enjoy a lot of the artistry of the Native Americans. As I said, I've traveled quite a bit and spent time with them, and so I've decorated the interior of my house as best I can to also display the Native American art that has been given to me. Now, as I said, Maynard and his wife and family are coming. I purchased my first paintings that Maynard did, his beautiful landscapes, in 1913. I told you that my father died and we had to go through that inheritance mess. And finally I was able to build this house. Well, I also had a home down in Southern California near Arcadia. And that special room in my house was called the Jinx Room. I told you I use strange names for things. Well, it was actually my party room. And when I saw some of Maynard's paintings, and the house was being constructed and we were talking about it, in the early 20s, I contacted Maynard and asked him if he would come and do murals on the walls of the Jinx Room. He said, of course he would. And so we decided he would do mostly landscapes, but definitely with a Native American theme. And so it is a party room, but it's also a very relaxing room that I can have a large number of guests there. But here are some more pictures of my house at Fallen Leaf Lake. You'll notice that even the walls, we purposely did beautiful woodworking on, and we showed more of the building. And we also, I am really thinking about Maynard coming with those children. I'm not sure I will have them come to my house. They have accommodations in the wigwam, they have a kitchen, they have a great room, they have bedrooms, they have a garage to park their car if they want to. And I'll have the tent set up right near there between that and the beach so the children can enjoy themselves outside. You know, I don't know that I want them there. There's just too many things, too many beautiful things. You'll notice the light fixtures in my house, even those we've had made and decorated for interior of the home. But there is one place that is my favorite place in the home. That's where my piano is. You know, I mentioned Baldwin. Baldwin is a musician. Well, I'm a musician too. I've actually written over 60 pieces of music. If you're interested, you can find them in the San Francisco newspapers. They actually printed out the music and you can find them there. But beware a little bit. Some people are offended because I am using often some words that some people wouldn't consider appropriate in my music, so I'll warn you about that ahead of time. But this is my piano, and I don't know if I mentioned before, I don't allow a radio in my house. I've had a radio room built down there at the bathhouse. And if you want to listen to the radio, you have to go down there. There are people that insist they have to listen to the radio. That is not for me. I have a radio room for that. But I do enjoy a musical interlude in the afternoon. When Maynard comes, we can go, I horseback ride just like that, but I do ride side saddle. And so Maynard can go out with me and we can ride together. We can also, he can go out and of course paint. He's said to me he's not sure about that, about painting here, but I think he will. And the other thing, I have a kennel here with dogs in it. And we have an arboretum with beautiful flowers and other things to walk in. So there's lots of things to do at this beautiful lake. And it's a quiet place. It's just my special place. I've added additional houses on the other side of the lake for Baldwin. And I added a house for Mr. Ray Nisley. He's the gentleman who takes care of my finances and other business items. And then one more house. Clara has a daughter. Her name is Rosebud, and she's married. And she and I actually kind of grew up together because we're almost the same age. So Rosebud is going to get the third house for she and her husband. But, oh, time is passing, and I must tell you, I want to see some new puppies that are down at the kennel, so I'm going to leave. If you'll excuse me. And now I can tell you, as Marilyn Long, the rest of the story. There's that beautiful lake. Anita had her home on one side with all of the things for everyone to do who came to visit her. She had guards around her property at all times. I did a performance down in Southern California and listened to the people that lived in the neighborhood where Anita was. And they said, oh, well, she had this fine train car that she had specially built. Actually, Clara and Anita both had private train cars to go to. She would have guards walk her from her house to the train to get on the train. And these people told me tales about that snooty woman. Why did she do that? Well, if you had the money Anita had, because oil was found on that other land, and so was a lot of other things that Lucky knew about, you would have had guards around too. So I'm sure she had, before Maynard came, she had to tell the guards that they were going to have guests. But I've even heard from some of my friends who I now have met the people that have lived in those 3 other houses, because you see, over the years, I've been lucky enough to be the archivist at the Tallac Historic Site and also at the Tahoe Historical Museum. The rug on the floor, that is a piece of Anita's tent. It's a beautiful quilted tent that I understand is very difficult to be put up, but my husband and I found it in a box in one of the cabins. And so we unpacked it, and when I saw it, I said, it's going to Reno with us. But here is the layout of the land and where the houses were. As I said, Anita's house was on Sawmill Cove and all of her property. And then over on the other side, she built 3 houses. You'll notice it lists the family names. The sad thing is where you see now, you will notice the U.S. Forestry Service now owns all the property. You can still go walking and see some things, but again, as archivist, I went into 2 of these houses and helped remove things that were artifacts that we have at the museum and at the Tallac Historic Site. Let's start with the first one at the top. That was built for Baldwin. My friend Susan tells me that it was a white house, 2-story, and that she remembers going upstairs in that house, and you could look straight across and see Anita's cabin. The second house, and we don't know that Baldwin ever came. I think he was too busy being a jazz musician in San Francisco. But then the next house down was built for Ray Knisley. Ray Knisley married one of the Camp Richardson daughters. There is some thought that maybe this house originally was built for Ray and his bride. But if you know anything about Camp Richardson, you know that there's something they call the Richardson House, which many of us from Lake Tahoe are a little bit out of place about, because we always knew it as the Knisley House. So if you go to Camp Rich, look for those things. But a friend of mine, Susan, as I said, her family, because we don't know that Ray lived in the house, her grandfather bought it, and she came up as a child, as a grandchild, to stay with Grandma and Grandpa. The kitchen was unbelievable, but all Susan could talk about was this heart-shaped bathroom sink. And she kept saying, Marilyn, you've got to get that bathroom sink so we can take it and save it. And I kept saying, why do we want to do this? And she says, well, you know, almost everything that was put in our cabins was from the resort. When Anita had it torn down, she took belongings from the resort to outfit those cabins that she was building for her friends. So that sink was from Lucky Baldwin's love cottage over on the Tallac Resort. Well, time went along. Forest Service decided they were going to tear down the house. So in planning to do that, my husband and I and many other people went over. We removed windows that are at the Tallac Historic Site so that if someday those windows have to be replaced, we've got authentic old windows. We have that beautiful sink in one of the cabins in its bathroom with a sign that says it was Lucky Baldwin's. Well, they also do a Great Gatsby Festival at the Tallac Historic Site. And one year I was there and I kept getting these tales from other volunteers. They said, Marilyn, somebody keeps calling for you and saying, come over, we want you to move furniture. And we've told them, you don't move furniture. Well, Susan was with me this day before the Great Gatsby, and she heard the name Taggart. I told you that Rosebud that house was built for her and her husband. They were kicked out of the house in the 1940s because they were cutting wood on the property that belonged to Anita, and she did not like that. And Ray Knisley, who followed Mother Baldwin's lead, kicked them out of the house. Another family bought it in the 40s, and then I'm not quite sure when the Taggarts bought it from that family. But here we walk, Susan said, we're going right now. So no matter what was happening for Great Gatsby, we went tearing over to the Taggart House. There I met two wonderful 86-year-old women who were very upset, but also with them was a grandson who was also very upset. They had tried to sell this property, not to the Forest Service, but to someone else. They had 40 acres, and they couldn't find a buyer. So when the Forest Service came along, they said they would buy the property, but there could be nothing left on the property. And so that's why they were in a panic to get someone to come and see what was there. They had brass beds from the old resort. We had none over at the Tallac Historic Site. They had kitchen items and kitchen fixtures and table. In fact, the table they had matched another table that we had taken from the Frederick Susan's house before, when we had removed things. She had removed things there. And the grandson, he was building a home in Southern California. So he wanted to take all the doors and the wood fixtures around the doors that were beautifully carved back to his home that he was building in Southern California. And of course we told him he could have anything. We went in there, took all the things that we thought we could use someplace else, and we did go back after a couple weeks, and you couldn't have told there was a house anywhere on the property. The one thing, and I haven't checked with anybody that's gone hiking there lately, that house was the only one that had a small pier, and it was there. So I told my dentist wife, I said, I knew she liked to hike out there. I said, take your book with you next time, and you can go lay on the pier and enjoy the Fallen Leaf Lake as much as Anita did. So that's all three homes. There's not a sign anywhere there of them. But there is something left of Anita's house. That is the foundation. I want to mention here three gentlemen that I owe a lot to these pictures. The first one, his name was Owen Evans. Owen Evans was the Forest Service person who was told to go and tear down Anita's house. Owen Evans documented everything in that house, and that's why we have these pictures. We would not have these pictures today if it wasn't for that gentleman who, as he took things down, kept them and took pictures of the rooms. But you know what they did? What were they going to do with that furniture? Or what were they going to do with all this stuff? Another friend of mine, his name is Rick Brower, he passed away this year. He and I did a lot of research on Anita's property together and did programs for some of the people at Fallen Leaf Lake to share what we knew and what they knew and could tell us. Rick died, but he had left behind his research. So I talked to his widow this last year, and she kindly gave us unbelievable research, including these pictures. Rick had worked for the Forest Service. He knew Owen Evans. And so that's how we got these pictures. Just another aside to Owen Evans. When you've heard of the Angora fire, maybe it was up at Lake Tahoe. Owen Evans' house was lost in the Angora fire, and all the pictures that he had of Anita's house were lost at that same time. So if it had not been for Rick Brower, we would not see her house today. But in the meantime, like I say, things were torn down. Owen Evans took some of the logs and he built another house in Lake Tahoe off of Ski Run Boulevard. And his daughter came to one of the talks that we did out there at the site. And in Rick's research, he blatantly says that Owen and the other people that took down Anita's house, they took the contents of the house outside and let anybody that came take it. And now I know why, as an archivist, I still get pots and pans back that say, this belonged to the McGonagals, or this belonged to the Baldwins, or things. And so if you go either place, I can show you things that came from this house, probably because those neighbors and other people came and took them home. And now years later, they don't want them in their home either, so they're giving it back to us to keep. But the other thing that's still standing is that fine fireplace. So if you go walking out there, that is the only thing besides the foundation that's still standing. Also, the pump house is there, but as time has gone on, we have wind in Lake Tahoe, and it's knocked some things down. The old growth forest, Maynard did paint, but if you look at the pictures upstairs that he painted, they're olive trees. He said the landscape wasn't visible because of all those trees. And he also, we know we had old growth redwood that John and I saw at one time. We even were there one time when there was a dangerous tree and a woodsman came in and one of the old growth trees were cut down. So there's not too many still on the property if you walk there today, but it's still worth the walk and looking around. Here's an overview of what it looks like. That fireplace right in the center, but there is the outline of Anita's house. She did have a basement. Several people said, well, did she keep wine in the basement? No, somebody told me that they actually had a furnace down there, so if it wasn't warm enough, they could bump it up a little bit, even with the fireplace. And back to that other picture I showed you, Anita's house is where the blue arrow is at. That's her floor plan. Here's the fallen leaf lake out in front of it. The stables and other things, and the dog kennels and so forth, they were up in the area of the red arrow. And the wigwam that Maynard and Dorothea stayed in, that one of them was up in the area of the orange arrow. And so you can see how they easily could have gone over to the beach area with the children. And there actually is in Dorothea's scrapbook, which she kept while they visited Anita, there is a picture of her sitting at the beach with the boys. But that's the story of Nijiwar. And I hope you've enjoyed and heard a little bit about what we're doing. And oh, one more little thing. That Taggart family, when we went in and took the last things, there was a shingle on the fireplace. And it gave her husband's name as owner of the lumber yard where the shingle came from. So that was the proof that they had been kicked out because of that. And I said to the ladies, I said, you're taking the shingle, aren't you? And maybe your grandson? And they said, no. We want you to have the shingle to prove what the story was. And so that shingle today is sitting at the Tallac Historic Site in one of the cabins. So if you go there and look for some of these things, I hope you enjoy the journey too. And now we're going to open it up to questions. Any questions?
Santa Anita,
Pardon?
the Santa Anita Ranch, is that what became the racetrack?
Okay, I'll give you a little history of the racetrack. Yeah, when Lucky died, are you ready? His favorite horse died the day before. They took the horse and they buried it at the racetrack. But it was on the property closer to the Arboretum. Later, there was an investor that helped Anita supposedly to build another racetrack in a better location. That gentleman was a little bit of a shyster, and so that was never built. The present Santa Anita Raceway, if you go there today, is on the third location of the raceway. And guess what? They moved the horse every time, and so it's there today too. Other questions?
I grew up in San Anita Rancho neighborhood. Where was her house that she had as an adult in the Southern California area?
Well, it was, and this, it was torn down at one point. Oh, and that's the one other thing I forgot to mention. Maynard's paintings from the Jinx Room. Would you like to see those paintings? Yes. Go to the California State Library and go up to the second floor. The murals were removed from her home, and they are on the second floor of the California State Library, so you can't see them. Anyway, back to her own home wasn't near the Arboretum as such. When I was down there, I asked the question, and I have seen a video of the house before it was torn down, but it was in an area where it was up the hill from Arcadia. It was a school for a period of time, a girls' school, and then when they decided they wanted fancier homes up in that development area, that house went away. So I'm not as familiar with the area as you probably are.
Yeah, that just reminded me, it was a Nokia school.
Yeah,
So
and she just told you Anita's name of her home down there. It's a Nokia. That's Anita and Oaks put together. And her big thing, if you go to the Arboretum still today, and they did sign that over to the city, and it is a beautiful place. I've been there. There are definitely white peacocks roaming the grounds there. And that was Anita's symbol that she had on everything, was a white peacock. That was a special thing of hers. Another one here, I think we may have to pass the mic in there to you, okay?
I have a question. There's a house at Fallen Leaf Lake called Skywood. And
I'm not understanding that word.
can you hear me?
Not.
Oh, okay. There's a house at Fallen Leaf Lake called Skywood.
Okay.
And I've always been told that that was built by Anita for her architect, and it still stands today. And it's on the west side.
Okay.
And it's up about a half a mile from her house.
Okay, I've never heard that. The other thing I have heard about that particular area, you know, the map I had of up here of the properties, you notice the squares don't always line up nice and even. There was at some point after Anita's death that there was a dispute between the Forest Service and people who own property on adjacent land, which may be what you're talking about, I don't know. But I was told that, well, surveyors weren't so great back in the 20s. Sorry.
Thank you.
David.
So, did all the property in one fell swoop go to the Forest Service, or was there an interim, some of it got...
It was interim time. In fact, one of the things that happened was that Knisley gentleman and Baldwin, they were instrumental in helping the family and heirs release the land to the Forest Service because they knew there was no way anybody could take care of it. So even Dextra, who by the way had 1930s furniture throughout her house, and today it has Anita's furniture in the museum. But anyway, they convinced Dextra and the other family members to let the Forest Service go. These individual ones then otherwise happened as the other families, like the Taggarts, couldn't sell their property or couldn't do anything with it, and the Forest Service just started collecting it all. So, way up there and back.
Hello, way up high. A question.
Anita, what was the actual relationship between she and Maynard Dixon? Were they friends? Was she a patron? Did she help him sell his artwork?
No, I
what
don't
exactly
think she was a patron of his, and that she appreciated. I think, and partly is because I've been here to many of the programs on Maynard, they both were into poetry. I have poetry from Anita all over the place, in addition to her music. And so I think they would have shared that love. They both liked to ride horses. We know that would have been a shared thing. Yes, Anita liked the whole Native American. In fact, one of the things that I heard here, and that's for me is a little bit, and you'll have to tell me if I'm wrong, but we don't have pictures of Native Americans in most of Maynard's paintings. But she had him painting Native American people for the Jinx Room. So I think that they must have had a very strong decision of what she wanted, and he accommodated that. There was one gentleman here earlier which fascinated me because I was here to hear the talk, but they talked about Anita and Maynard and Dorothea went down to the Hopi Reservation, and she stayed in her fine car, and the Hopi people came in and out of her car and would talk to her every day. Well, but she got a little bit bored of that, and so she left Maynard there, but Dorothea and she came back in the private car back to Southern California. So there was a lot of other connections that we just haven't put together.
Hello. The furniture that we saw in her home, and artisan, you said it was artisan made. Where were those artisans? Were they Carson City, up here, or down in Southern California? Do we know?
Okay. There was Forest Service. I'll back up a little bit more. Forest Service brought a director in the 90s to start the Tallac Historic Site, and she had a museum background. In fact, I asked her recently, she lives in Florida, we visited her on a recent trip, but I asked her about the tent after John and I found it. I said, how did you end up with the tent? Because in with the box were different things that had mailing items, and by the way, this had Tallac numbers on it, not the museum in town, who now has the property, so we have a lot of that. But anyway, so I'm digressing too far. So basically, Linda said to me, the tent and the box were sitting in the barn at the McGonigal estate. I said, well, what about all the rest of the perfect matchings that are in these pictures to there? And she said, there were additional pieces that were brought to us, and we copied from those pieces. So somebody, whether it was Owen Evans or who, protected some of this. I don't know beyond that. And Linda said she didn't know either. She just knew that there were a few things in the barn, which is where she got the idea. And she had never seen some of these pictures. So really no answer there. Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Marilyn.
Oh, okay. And I will stay around for a few minutes to talk to some people. Okay. I do have a badge you're hearing. Okay.
The resort. So did Lucky Baldwin build a resort before they put the family homes there? And the resort was
the resort was a common guy that's coming and could spend the money up here at Tahoe. You know, it was over. He bought a piece of land that another gentleman had, and then he added all this other property. And so when he did that, he kept this house at what we call the Point House. It was burned down at one time. The resort itself then was torn down. There were 3 annexes of buildings people could stay in. That's how many. I mean, they had housing for probably well over 500 people totally. Then there were some individual cottages. The Standard Oil family, they had a cottage. Lucky had a cottage. There were other ones that were owned by people, and so those cottages, all of it was destroyed. They say it's because she said the sewage was going into the lake.
Oh my.
But I've read enough that no, it was not in great condition, just like the houses on the resort haven't always been. So.
Marvelous. Thank you so much.
You said one of the daughters looked more like the sister.
Yes.
Was that because of an affair or something, or just
No,
just
nothing that I know
genetics?
of. Yeah.
Okay.
And just to let you know, the present generation had no knowledge that Anita had a house at Fallen Leaf Lake. We contacted them, and actually one of the great-granddaughters brought her children up and sat at the piano that we had, it came from, and actually were able to sit there and play it.
Awesome.
So that's the only family connection I ever have otherwise.
Did you ever meet Kibby? Kibby, did you ever meet him?
No.
Thank you so much. It was just a beautiful talk and
you.
interesting the way you started it. Really great.
And do you know she did that? She came out one time and she saw these people. Her best friend was with her. She handed her speech and she went home.
That was amazing. What dentist did you call to say if you wanted, or she?
Oh, it was Cunningham?
Cunningham. I'll have to check. I knew all of them up there.
Oh, okay.
So in 1966, I got married, and that's where my husband brought me on our honeymoon.
Okay.
And is there anything left at all? I mean, I don't even remember. There was some sort of lodge when we were there in '66, but
Well, there's Camp Richardson, which has been taken over by somebody else.
but that's-
Then the Pope House. There's the McGonigal, that is the museum itself at Tallac. Then the Pope House is on that property, and Valhalla, which was owned also. Those 3 homes are part of the historical site. But
We'll
I
have to
don't
go
know
up
of
there
anything
again.
else.
It's been probably, 20, 30 years since I've been there. Thank you
Sure.
again so
Is
much.
that still there? Is this, no, the entrance is not
In
there?
fact, when this Rick Brower and I went there, we hunted and hunted. We had this whole thing. Where was the gate?
The gate, yeah.
If you remember, back to my picture, can I go back? See if I can go back.
This was part of the tent?
This is part of the tent, yes.
It's actually part of the tent?
That's part of the tent. Where was I going to?
Oh, to the gate.
To the gate. Okay. It's way back at the beginning. I'll show you.
I'll share them with you. Or vice versa. Or do.
Yeah. So, here's Cathedral Road that you can drive on today. Okay. And when you get in that area, there is a couple camps that bring boats in and go down to the Sawmill Cove to launch your boats.
Okay.
And so you can. There's kind of a driveway in, and that would be over here on this far side. Okay. So as you come down, and you can still see the roadways pretty clearly. So if you come down, we think the gate is in that location, and the wigwam, you can see where it was. Okay. And then if you continue on down, it's very overgrown and there's nothing much. But down here by the stable area you can see that big chimney.
Oh, okay.
And so you can walk on down and see the rest of that.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'll have to make a visit up there.
Hi, can
Hi.
we get a picture with you?
Oh, sure. You want to?
He's going to
set up his.
You want someone to take it? Okay.
Oh, well, heavens, we need Anita.
Oh, you grab my hat? Okay. I threw it somewhere back there.